You're not on the list." The words dropped onto the yacht's upper deck like the crack of a crystal glass, shattering whatever calm the ocean breeze had carried in. The voice belonged to Victoria Hale, wife of an oil tycoon, draped in a form-fitted, deep royal purple gown that caught the light with every deliberate step. Her diamond necklace sparked under the warm glow, but her eyes were ice as they swept from the top of the coral orange dress in front of her to the hem brushing the teak floor. That dress belonged to Amina Cole. Her black hair was pulled into a precise low tie. A few strands tugged free by the salt wind. One hand held a slim rolling case, the other pressed a phone to her ear. The low, steady voice on the other end continued, but Amina didn't respond to Victoria's challenge. She didn't have to. Behind her, two security men in dark suits moved into position, blocking the path forward. One leaned in, voice low enough to feign discretion but loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Ma'am, this is a private reception. You'll need to step out of the VIP section." No one spoke about tickets, or invitation codes, or ownership stakes. Here, a color of fabric and the wrong face were enough to make a verdict. The deck glittered with glassware and white-draped tables. Champagne flutes caught the reflection of the harbor lights. A cluster of women in floor-length gowns turned toward each other, whispering behind manicured hands. The ocean kept its rhythm against the hull, but between Amina and Victoria, the air felt heavier than steel. By the bar, a young server froze mid-pour. He knew this woman. 3 months ago in Geneva, she stood on a stage speaking about sustainable investment like she owned the future. Here, under jazz music and narrowed eyes, she looked like someone they thought didn't belong. Slowly, he unlocked his phone and opened the voice recorder. Victoria took a slow sip of champagne, still holding Amina in her line of sight. "Do the staff wear colors like that now?" she said, letting the words trail into a smirk. A ripple of restrained laughter moved through the nearby circle. Amina shifted her phone to the other ear, eyes steady. The evening wind caught the skirt of her coral dress, pulling it just enough to reveal the precision of its cut. Professional, powerful, deliberate. Up on the mezzanine, the band changed tempo. Down here, the scene had only begun its opening act, and if anyone had been watching closely, they would have seen her fingers tighten on the handle of her case, not from fear, but because she had decided exactly how this night would end. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Amina. On the surface, Amina looked like a guest who had taken a wrong turn, but that coral orange dress wasn't an accident. Neither was the lack of jewelry, the absence of an entourage, or the fact that her name hadn't been pre-checked at the entry table. Tonight was deliberate. The Hale Foundation Gala was supposed to be the social event of the quarter, a floating palace of wealth, networking, and whispered deals. Amina Cole was on the board. She was also a silent co-host. But she hadn't told anyone she was coming, not even the host's wife, especially not the host's wife. Up on the mezzanine, the laughter was polite, curated for optics. Down here, the smiles were thinner. Victoria Hale took another slow step forward, the deep royal purple of her gown grazing the teak deck. "You understand this is a private guest list," she said, tilting her champagne flute just enough to send a ribbon of gold liquid sliding down the side. "We take security seriously." Amina's phone call ended with a soft click. She slipped it into her clutch, eyes never leaving Victoria's. "I'm sure you do," she said evenly. One of the security guards shifted his stance, trying to look casual. The other scanned the surrounding tables as if searching for someone to back him up. Guests near the railing pretended not to watch, their gazes flicking over in quick, guilty intervals. By the bar, the young server's phone kept recording, the red icon glowing faintly in his palm. He remembered her keynote in Geneva, the quiet authority in her voice, the way she dismantled a panelist's flawed argument without raising her volume. This was the same energy now, compressed into silence. Victoria's smile thinned. "I'll make this simple. You can enjoy the public deck with the other guests, or—" her gaze dropped to Amina's rolling case. "We can have security escort you off the yacht." Amina didn't move, didn't blink. "Is that a policy?" she asked. "Or just your preference?" That drew a few muffled laughs from the edges of the crowd, the kind that slipped out before people could stop themselves. Victoria caught the sound and turned her head sharply toward it. The room, if you could call a yacht deck a room, tightened. Somewhere near the stage, the MC's voice floated over the PA, introducing the next segment. Applause rolled across the deck, but in this small circle of tension, no one clapped. The taller guard stepped in half a pace. "Ma'am, I'll need to ask you to—" "That won't be necessary." The words came from a man in a tuxedo stepping out from the shadows of a side stairwell. His voice was low but carried the weight of someone used to being heard. He was a senior board member, and he recognized Amina. But before he could say more, Victoria cut him off. "Actually," she said, her tone sweetening like a blade dipped in sugar, "it will be necessary. We can't have disruptions in the VIP area." Amina glanced past her to the young server. He swallowed hard but didn't lower his phone. Her fingers curled once around the handle of her case. Then she said softly but with precision, "You're sure you want to finish that sentence?" The question hung there, heavier than the ocean air, while the party music played on above them. Victoria's eyes sharpened. "I think I will," she said, letting the pause stretch as if savoring her own authority. "We can't have people strolling in here just because they look the part." It wasn't loud, but the words carried enough for nearby guests to exchange glances. A woman in a sequined gown leaned toward her husband. "Did she really just say that?" he whispered back. "You heard her." Amina didn't flinch. Her stillness was starting to unnerve the taller guard, who shifted his weight again, one polished shoe squeaking softly against the deck. Upstairs, a burst of laughter from the mezzanine swept down like a reminder that the rest of the party had no idea what was brewing below. The music tried to fill the space, but here, every note seemed distant, hollow. By the bar, the young server adjusted his phone, tilting it to catch both women in frame. He knew the audio mattered, but the image coral against royal purple told its own story. One warm, commanding, the other cold, immaculate. Victoria took another deliberate step closer, closing the gap to less than a foot. The scent of her expensive perfume cut through the salt air. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. "And on a night like this, well, let's just say my husband values order." The shorter guard reached for the handle of Amina's rolling case. She didn't move, didn't release it. Her voice was level. "Let go." He didn't. And in that moment, the act became more than a gesture. It became possession, a silent statement that she had no claim here. Cameras from two nearby guests lifted almost instinctively. One click, then another. Victoria noticed the movement, glanced at the lenses, and raised her chin. "Photograph this if you like," she told them. "We're just ensuring our standards are upheld." Amina's gaze stayed locked on her. "Standards," she repeated, the words soft but heavy. The man in the tuxedo who had tried to intervene earlier stepped forward again. "Victoria!" "Not now," she snapped, her eyes never leaving Amina. It was then that the young server made his choice. He stepped out from behind the bar, voice trembling but clear enough to be heard. "She belongs here." The crowd shifted. Heads turned. Someone upstairs leaned over the railing to see what was happening. Victoria's lips curved into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Oh, and who exactly is she to you?" The server swallowed. "She's—" He stopped himself, glancing at Amina, who gave the faintest shake of her head. "Just a guest," he finished. Victoria laughed softly, a sound that cut sharper than any shout. "Exactly my point." And with that, she turned to the taller guard. "Escort her out." The order was simple, the kind that assumed compliance. But Amina stayed rooted, her coral dress catching another gust of ocean wind, almost like it refused to be moved. Her hand tightened once on the case handle, then released, not in surrender, but in calculation. She let the silence work, let the cameras roll. The taller guard moved first, stepping into Amina's space with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. His hand closed around the handle of her rolling case. "Ma'am, we're going to walk you out now." Amina's eyes stayed on Victoria. "You're certain this is the choice you want to make in front of them?" She tilted her head slightly toward the half-circle of onlookers, guests, servers, even a photographer with a press badge dangling from his neck. Victoria's smile didn't waver. "Absolutely." The guard gave the case a tug. It didn't move. "I said, you heard her," came a voice from the mezzanine railing above. A woman in an emerald green cocktail dress was leaning over, phone in hand, camera already rolling. "She belongs here. I saw her name on the board's seating chart." A few guests murmured. Another voice joined in from the starboard side, a man in a navy blazer. And even if she didn't, is this how you treat people at a charity gala? Victoria's gaze snapped toward them. This is a private matter. Not anymore, the man shot back. Not with half the deck watching. Huh. The shorter guard stepped forward now, flanking Amina's other side. The move was meant to be intimidating, but it only made the scene feel more like a standoff. From the corner, the young server edged closer, phone still recording, the red icon on screen catching the glint of a nearby sconce. Amina's voice cut through the murmurs, low, precise. You don't get to erase someone just because they don't fit your idea of who belongs in first class, or first tables. Huh. That line hit harder than the wind. The photographer lifted his camera, shutter clicking in rapid bursts now. Upstairs, a few more guests leaned over the railing, the arc of phones growing like a row of quiet spotlights. Victoria's tone sharpened. Security! Touch her, and you'll regret it. Came another voice this time from the man in the tuxedo who'd tried twice to defuse the situation. He stepped fully into the circle, placing himself between Amina and the guards. I know exactly who she is, and if you lay a hand on her, it won't be her who leaves tonight. The taller guard hesitated, glancing at Victoria for confirmation. Her jaw tightened. Do your job. Amina shifted her weight, just enough to plant herself. The coral fabric of her dress moved with the breeze, a warm contrast to the cold purple that loomed inches away. She didn't raise her voice, didn't break eye contact. This is the moment you'll remember when you're explaining to the press why your foundation lost $1.5 billion in funding. The words weren't shouted, but the effect was immediate. The murmuring swelled. The photographer lowered his camera just enough to whisper to someone beside him, Did she just say $1.5 billion? The young server stopped recording, thumb hovering over the screen. He didn't need more proof, but he was going to keep it anyway. Victoria blinked, just once. But it was enough for anyone paying attention to see the first hairline crack. Victoria recovered quickly, or at least tried to. Funding? She scoffed, brushing an invisible speck from her gown's sleeve. Please, my husband's circle could replace any donor 10 times over. You think anyone here is going to miss, whatever it is you do? A few in the crowd chuckled nervously, unsure if it was safe to laugh. The emerald dress woman upstairs shook her head in disbelief. The man in the navy blazer muttered something under his breath and took a sip of champagne. Amina didn't react. Her stillness made the insult feel smaller somehow, like it had been thrown at a wall instead of a person. Victoria turned, half addressing the onlookers. I'm sorry you've had to witness this disruption. I suppose some people mistake bold colors for an invitation. Her eyes slid back to Amina, lingering on the coral dress. That earned a sharper murmur from the crowd, the kind that signaled the line between confidence and cruelty had been crossed. Even the taller guard shifted uncomfortably now, his grip on the case loosening. The man in the tuxedo spoke again, more firmly this time. Victoria, this is not the way. But she ignored him, lifting her chin. Gentlemen, she said to the guards, remove her. They stepped forward in unison. The younger one reached for Amina's arm and froze when her phone lit up in her hand. The screen glowed with a single name at the top. Board Operations. She pressed a button. Activate Protocol 8. A voice on the other end, calm, clipped, replied instantly. Confirmed. Executing now. Victoria laughed. A brittle sound. What is that, some kind of bluff? Amina didn't answer. She just slid the phone back into her clutch and adjusted her grip on the case handle. From somewhere toward the bow, the faint chime of a PA system rang out. The music faded. A man's voice came over the speakers. Attention guests, please be advised. There will be a brief announcement from the board. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Even the band on the mezzanine stopped mid-note. Victoria frowned. What is this? The man in the tuxedo didn't look at her. It's the sound of you overplaying your hand. Ugh. Amina took a single step forward. Not enough to touch Victoria, but enough to close the air between them. Her voice was low, almost conversational. In about 2 minutes, everyone on this yacht will know exactly who I am. The only question is how you'll explain this scene when they do. The young server's recording caught it all, the words, the steady tone, the flash of something in Victoria's eyes that wasn't confidence anymore. It was recognition. And that's when the first applause started tentative, scattered, but unmistakably in Amina's corner. The scattered applause grew louder, swelling into something Victoria couldn't quite drown out with a smile. She turned toward the mezzanine as if looking for her husband, but he was nowhere in sight. From the bow speakers, the announcer's voice returned. Ladies and gentlemen, Please join me in welcoming a special guest and co-host of tonight's Hale Foundation Gala. The deck went still. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Even the ocean seemed to hush for a beat. Victoria's painted smile faltered. Co-host? She repeated under her breath. The man in the tuxedo stepped aside, giving Amina a clear path toward the small riser at the center of the deck. The guards didn't move to stop her now, one even stepped back, eyes down. Amina's heels tapped a steady rhythm across the teak as she walked. The coral fabric of her dress caught the deck lights with each step, a warm blaze against the cool night. The young server followed at a respectful distance, still holding his phone. He didn't need to, the room itself was recording now, dozens of guests lifting their devices to capture what was about to happen. At the riser, Amina paused. She didn't reach for the microphone immediately. Instead, she scanned the crowd, the mezzanine railings, the clusters by the bar, the starboard tables. Finally, her gaze landed back on Victoria, still rooted near the railing, deep royal purple framed in gold light. "Before I say anything," Amina began, her voice carrying without strain, "I want to thank the Hale Foundation for hosting this beautiful evening, and for inviting me to stand here, in front of all of you." She let the words breathe, just long enough for their double meaning to settle. A few people in the crowd exchanged knowing looks. "My name," she continued, "is Amina Cole. I am the founder and CEO of Cole Global Capital. I also sit on the board of this foundation, and for the past 18 months, she paused, a faint smile touching her lips, "I've been the single largest individual donor in its history." The reaction was immediate, a ripple of whispers, a few sharp intakes of breath. Upstairs, someone actually clapped once before realizing they were the only one and stopping. Victoria's face didn't move, but her grip on the champagne flute tightened just enough for her knuckles to pale. Amina shifted her weight slightly, keeping her tone measured. "I arrived tonight without announcement, without an entourage, and without the usual formalities, because I wanted to see this evening through the eyes of every guest, every staff member, every volunteer who makes it possible. And I did." Her gaze swept deliberately toward the young server, who straightened in his spot. Then her eyes found Victoria again. "And what I saw," she said, "was that dignity still depends too much on recognition on whether someone fits an expectation or a list." The crowd was silent now, the kind of silence that carries more weight than any outburst. "Tonight," Amina concluded, "I'm here to change that." The applause came again louder this time, not scattered but unified. Phones stayed up, flashes sparking across the deck. And somewhere deep in the sound, Victoria's own silence was the loudest note of all. Victoria forced a small laugh, the kind meant to suggest all of this was an amusing misunderstanding. She stepped forward, raising her glass just enough for the diamonds on her bracelet to catch the light. "Well," she said brightly, "now that we all know who you are, let's forget these little mix-ups and enjoy the evening, shall we?" Her tone dripped with practiced charm, but the undercurrent was brittle. Amina didn't move from the riser. "I think," Amina replied, "it's worth remembering exactly how we got here." The words landed heavier than any shout. The man in the tuxedo folded his arms, watching Victoria closely. Guests shifted uncomfortably. The woman in the emerald dress upstairs muttered something to the man beside her. He nodded, eyes locked on the scene. Victoria's smile wavered. "I was simply following protocol. You arrived unannounced." "Protocols protect people," Amina cut in smoothly, "when they're written for the right reasons." That drew a low murmur from the crowd. The younger security guard stared at the deck, jaw tight. The older one had already taken a step back toward the perimeter. Victoria tried again. "I'm sure we can work past this. You and I both want what's best for the foundation." "Do we?" Amina's question was soft, but it froze Victoria mid-breath. "Because what I've seen tonight is a foundation whose leadership is comfortable humiliating a board member, a major donor, and—" She paused, letting the weight settle. "A partner in a $1.5 billion merger." There it was, the number, guests murmured, the sound swelling like a tide. Upstairs, phones tilted forward for better angles. Victoria blinked, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a cough. "You wouldn't seriously end the deal?" Amina finished for her. "I would. I am." Gasps rippled through the deck. The man in the tuxedo didn't flinch, if anything, his lips tightened in approval. The emerald dress woman upstairs leaned into her phone. whispering fiercely to someone on the other end. Victoria's hand trembled just enough for champagne to kiss the rim of her glass. "Amina, let's be reasonable." "Reason," Amina said evenly, "is exactly why I won't let $1.5 billion sit in the hands of people who think power is proven by who they can keep out of a room." The young server's phone caught every syllable. He knew before it was over that the clip would go viral before dawn. Victoria glanced toward the bow, as if willing her husband to appear. He didn't. The crowd was no longer hers. It was leaning visibly, audibly toward the woman in coral. Amina stepped down from the riser, the applause following her like a tide rolling in. She walked straight past Victoria, close enough for their gowns to brush. Without looking back, she said, "You'll receive the formal withdrawal paperwork by morning." For a moment, all that could be heard was the ocean and the soft hum of the yacht's engines. Then the applause rose again, louder than before, drowning out everything else. The applause didn't fade this time. It built steady, rhythmic, pulling more guests into its current with each clap. The sound climbed the mezzanine, echoed against the glass, and spilled out into the night air over the water. Victoria stood frozen, her smile gone. The deep royal purple of her gown looked heavier now, weighed down by eyes that no longer held deference. The man in the tuxedo moved first, stepping toward Amina as she made her way across the deck. "You handled that with grace," he said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Exactly what leadership looks like." That unlocked something in the crowd. The woman in the emerald dress upstairs raised her voice. "For the record, I saw her name on the official seating chart. This should never have happened." A murmur of agreement rippled back from the guests around her. By the bar, the young server finally stopped his recording, tucking the phone away as if sealing evidence. "She didn't raise her voice once," he told another staffer. "Not once, and she still shut it down." Amina moved through the deck with deliberate calm, acknowledging people with a slight nod, a handshake, a word of thanks. Every step was filmed. A freelance photographer, lens trained on her since she left the riser, trailed a few paces behind. His shots, coral dress framed by the crowd, hair pulled sleek, eyes steady, were already being uploaded to wire services by his assistant. The MC, sensing the shift, abandoned the evening's scripted order and took the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, a reminder that this gala celebrates the work and generosity of all our partners, including Miss Amina Cole, whose contributions have transformed the Foundation's global reach." The applause swelled again. People were no longer clapping out of politeness. They were clapping because the story had changed, and they wanted to be seen on the right side of it. Victoria tried to move, to reinsert herself into the flow. But each time she took a step, someone intercepted her, a guest with a handshake for Amina, a photographer asking for just one more shot, a staff member offering to refresh Amina's drink. The younger security guard approached Amina quietly. "I'm sorry," he said, low enough that only she could hear. "I didn't know." She looked at him for a moment, then nodded once. "Now you do." "Oh." A few feet away, the older guard was already speaking to another guest, shaking his head as if distancing himself from the earlier scene. From the mezzanine, phones were pointed downward like a bank of stage lights, capturing the moment the crowd's center of gravity shifted entirely. What had been Victoria's room an hour ago now belonged to the woman in coral. The man in the tuxedo stepped to Amina's side. "The board will back you on this," he murmured. "I know," she said, her gaze still scanning the deck. "But I don't need their permission." When she finally turned her head toward Victoria, it wasn't with malice, it was with the quiet finality of someone who'd already decided the next move. And Victoria, for the first time that night, looked away first. The applause had thinned to a steady hum of conversation, but the shift in the room's air remained. Amina navigated through the clusters of guests, her steps measured, until she reached the far portside rail, a quieter pocket of the deck where the sea stretched out like a sheet of black glass. Victoria was there, alone now, away from the lights and lenses, the purple satin of her gown rippling faintly in the wind. She didn't turn when Amina approached, but her grip on the rail tightened. "You wanted a private moment," Amina said, her voice calm, "so let's have one." Victoria exhaled sharply, as if bracing for a blow. "I made a mistake. You've made your point." "This isn't about making a point," Amina replied. "It's about making sure it never happens again." Victoria glanced over her shoulder. "You've embarrassed me in front of everyone we know." Amina stepped closer. enough for the salt air between them to compress. "No, Victoria, you embarrassed yourself. I just made sure there were witnesses." "Yeah." The other woman's jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. "You're going to ruin the merger over this? Do you have any idea what that will cost?" Amina's gaze didn't waver. $1.5 billion is less than the cost of letting people like you set the tone for a partnership. I don't buy into rooms where the first question is who you can keep out. Victoria turned fully then, her voice low. "You've just made an enemy." Amina's lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. "I didn't make you anything. You walked into that role the second you thought you could decide my place here." The sea hissed against the hull below, filling the silence that followed. "I'll survive without your deal," Victoria said finally. "I'm sure you will," Amina replied, "but you won't survive without changing the way you measure people. And I don't mean in dollars." She let that hang in the air, watching it register. Then she stepped back, turning toward the brighter part of the deck where the crowd still lingered. Before she left, she added, "The paperwork's already in motion, but if you ever want to rebuild, start by showing up where you least expect to belong and listen." Victoria didn't answer. She stayed by the rail, eyes fixed on the dark water, as the sound of Amina's heels receded into the laughter and music returning to the gala. Up near the stairs, the young server caught her eye and gave a small nod, the quiet kind shared between people who understand the same truth. She returned it without breaking stride. By the time Amina reached the gangway, the coral dress was the only thing anyone could see moving against the night, a flame leaving the deck behind. The gangway gleamed under floodlights, flanked by velvet ropes and a line of waiting photographers. The harbor air was cooler here, tinged with the scent of salt and diesel. Somewhere across the water, another yacht's party music thumped faintly, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. Amina stepped off the deck with the same deliberate pace she had used all evening. The coral orange dress caught every flash from the cameras, making her look less like a guest leaving and more like she was arriving to something bigger. "Miss Cole," one reporter called. "Is it true you just pulled out of the $1.5 billion merger with Hale Industries?" She paused on the carpeted pier, microphones angling toward her like a bouquet of steel flowers. "It's true," she said. "I believe in partnerships that build, not belittle." Another shouted over the hum of shutters, "Was this about what happened on board tonight?" Amina met the camera lenses head-on. Tonight was just a reminder that power isn't proven by who you can keep out of a room, but by who you choose to let in. The line landed. Even the seasoned press pack hesitated before asking the next question. Amina gave them nothing more. She stepped forward, flanked by two discreet members of her own security team who had been waiting beyond the light. They weren't dressed like the yacht's guards, no earpieces, no obvious bulk under their suits, just quiet, efficient presence. A black sedan rolled forward from the curb, its polished surface reflecting the frenzy of flashbulbs. A driver stepped out, opening the rear door without a word. As she reached the car, the young server from earlier appeared at the edge of the crowd. He had ditched his uniform jacket, but she recognized him instantly. Their eyes met. He lifted his phone just enough for her to see the recording still saved on screen, then mouthed, "It's safe." She nodded once, a small acknowledgement that needed no words, and slid into the back seat. The door closed. The cameras kept firing, catching the last frame of her silhouette against the leather interior before the sedan pulled away. Inside, Amina allowed herself a slow breath, not relief resolve. The withdrawal paperwork was already with her legal team. By morning, the market would know, and by afternoon, so would every potential partner who had been watching to see if she would flinch. She didn't look back at the yacht. Some doors, once closed, don't deserve a second glance. The harbor lights blurred past the window as the driver merged into the city traffic. Somewhere behind her, Victoria Hale would still be on deck, smiling for the wrong cameras, answering the wrong questions. And Amina Cole, flame against the night, was already on to the next move. By sunrise, the harbor was calm again, but the story had already escaped into the world. Amina's phone buzzed steadily on her kitchen counter, not with missed calls, but with news alerts. Her name was on every headline. Coral dress. Steel will CEO. Amina Cole walks from $1.5 billion rupees deal. Power shift on the high seas. Charity gala showdown goes viral. Power is who you let in. Quote of the year. The footage from the young server's phone had hit every social platform before dawn. It was raw, unpolished, and devastatingly clear. Victoria's words, the guard's hands on the case, Amina's steady counter, the moment the crowd turned. Cable news was running split screens, one side looping Amina's exit down the gangway, the other replaying her on-deck introduction as the Hale Foundation's largest donor. Analysts talked about her masterclass in executive poise. One panelist called it the corporate equivalent of a checkmate in under 10 moves. Across town, Victoria Hale was learning just how far the ripple reached. Her phone was stacked with unread messages, some from board members demanding an explanation, others from sponsors quietly expressing concern about optics. The foundation's PR team had issued a bland statement about unfortunate miscommunications, but it was drowned out by the viral clip. Social media wasn't kind. Number coral over purple trended within hours. Memes compared Victoria's tight-lipped smile to sinking ships, while others looped the moment Amina said, "I would. I am." In a glossy downtown boardroom, 3 major investors in Hale Industries held a private call. The $1.5 billion merger had been the company's crown jewel, now it was ash. "We can't afford leadership that alienates partners at that level," one said flatly. "Not in this climate." Meanwhile, Amina sat at her dining table, coffee in hand, reading the coverage without rushing. Her legal team had already confirmed the withdrawal paperwork had been delivered before midnight. Her communications director texted, "Press requests are stacked. Do you want to respond?" She typed back, "No comment. Let the footage speak." The young server's video had already been credited in multiple outlets. Amina's office had quietly arranged for his identity to remain protected, but she made a note to have someone reach out. Some witnesses deserve more than just thanks. By mid-morning, the calls shifted from reporters to potential partners. One venture group opened with, "If you're looking for your next billion-dollar project, we'd like to talk." Another simply said, "We respect how you handled yourself. Let's meet." Outside her window, the city was waking up, coffee carts steaming, traffic lights flipping, people heading into offices with screens that would, inevitably, replay her words from last night. The yacht was just one night, but the ripple was turning into a current, and Amina Cole knew exactly how to ride it. 2 nights later, the harbor glittered under another string of charity galas. Different yachts, different gowns, but the air still carried the aftershock of what had happened on the Hale Foundation deck. In a quiet corner of a private club overlooking the marina, Amina sat with a small circle of colleagues. The room was low-lit, walls lined with framed photographs of past events, most of them crowded with the same faces, year after year. One of her friends leaned in. "You know, the footage has passed 15 million views." Amina's expression didn't change. It was never about the number. Then what was it about? She let the question hang for a beat before answering. Making sure that the next time someone hears, "You're not on the list," they know the list isn't the final word. Her friend smiled, raising a glass. "To rewriting the list." They clinked glasses. Across the harbor, the Hale yacht sat at its berth, lights dim, no party on board. Word had spread that several board members had resigned. Others were pushing for new leadership. Victoria hadn't been seen in public since the night of the gala. Amina rose from the table and stepped out onto the balcony. The city lights blurred in the water, just like the camera flashes had blurred in her memory. Somewhere in the distance, a jazz saxophone drifted out from another event, a softer echo of the music that had played the night she was stopped at the VIP section. She thought about the guard's hands on her case, about the smirk behind the champagne glass, about the weight of all the eyes that had assumed she didn't belong. And then she thought about the applause, not the polite kind, but the real, swelling wave that had followed her off the yacht. In her mind, the scene didn't end with her stepping into the black sedan. It ended here, with the knowledge that the line she'd spoken, "Power isn't proven by who you can keep out of a room, but by who you choose to let in," had outlived the moment. Her phone buzzed. Another message from a major investor. "We're ready when you are." She slipped the phone into her clutch without replying. Some deals could wait. Some doors needed to be opened on her terms. Down on the docks, a couple walked past, one of them pointing toward the Hale yacht. "That's the one from the video," they whispered. Amina smiled faintly. The coral dress was back in its garment bag now, but its work was done. She turned away from the water, heels clicking against the balcony floor, already thinking about the next room she would walk into and the next list she might have to rewrite. Because for her, the real power wasn't just getting in, It was changing the room once she was there.